collecting stuff, more and more and more things will give you a very dull life. But if you can switch your allegiance from things to experiences, that's when you're starting to live. That's when you're starting to increase your well-being.
Hi guys, welcome to the Being Yourself show, where we talk to the people who have followed their passion to achieve great success and have impacted many lives. If you have not already done so, please do consider subscribing to this channel and don't forget to hit the bell icon so that you get notification to all my future videos. This episode is being recorded in association with Let's Localize, the organization with a mission to foster the micro contribution from communities and businesses to support schools for their needs of skill, time, and money. I'm your host, Ajay Mathur, and my guest today is a TEDx and a global keynote speaker, an entrepreneur, and an author who brings the critical problems in the society into the light. He's also been featured in BBC, MSNBC, Guardian, Observer, The Sunday Times, The Financial Times, The New York Times, and on and on and on. He also advises the UK government on the experiment economy. His corporate clientele includes HSBC, KPMG, KFC, Facebook, and many more. So please welcome the alumnus of Cambridge and Oxford both, and an author of 2 best-selling books, Stuffocation and Time and How to Spend It, which has also been named as the Book of the Year by Financial Times in 2019, James Wallman. James, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ajay. As I was hearing that, all I was thinking was, he's also the guy who's got 2 children running around in his house at the moment. And I want to check that's not going to spoil the audio. Can you hear them? Do I need to go and...
it's fine. Okay? No, it's absolutely fine.
I guess the challenge of lockdown is, which
it's
we
more
all
natural.
have, right? Is kids.
It's so much more natural, so we can live with that,
Okay.
Definitely.
Okay.
Right. So I wanted to ask you, first thing is, what inspired you to write these 2 books, Stuffocation and The Time?
Wow, great question. It was different for different books. The first book, so I've been a trend forecaster. I've been a journalist and a trend forecaster since about 2004. And I became very aware that there was this problem with materialism, and there was also this rise of experiences. And so the big message in Stuffocation was that there is a problem with materialism. The problem is the environment, it's well-being. There's the tensions in our society around inequality, but the environment and well-being, and the fact that we just got so much stuff is the kind of defining thing. We're moving from materialism to what I call experientialism. And no one else had written it. No one else was banging this drum. And I felt I had something that was worth saying and something that needed to be said. And I say that because it took me another 5 years to get around to publishing a next book. My editor would come to me and say, James, okay, I love this Stuffocation, this experience stuff. What's the next trend? Come on, let's do another book on the next big trend. And I'd be like, but I don't think this is like a spring, summer, autumn, winter. It's not like a, flowers this year or stripes or this yellow or whatever. This is a fundamental cultural shift. This is not a kind of, a flash in the pan thing. This is a big, long change. It's a bit like if you think about an English sunset in the summer, especially in June, July, where the sunset just goes on for hours and hours and hours. This is how our society is changing. So I felt that the book needed to be written, hadn't been written, so I felt this should be done. There was another thing that my grandfather, on the day that he died, gave me a note saying, and in it said, it's quite a few years ago now, it was a £5 note, and he said, buy yourself a nice memento or something. And he said, and he didn't know he was going to die. We'd just been out for lunch, and he and my grandmother and my father had come back to my house, my home. Actually, it was a flat in Brixton, and he gave me this note, and it also said on it, memories live longer than things. And it really stayed with me. So when I saw this change coming and I had that note from him, memories live longer than things, I really wanted to share that idea. And there was also the science that was becoming very clear that showed that if you wanted to be happy, you should spend less on stuff and more on experiences. And I wanted to share that information. Now everybody knows it. It's become a thing that people know, but they didn't know that when I first started working on the book back in 2010, 2011. And then the next book, Time and How to Spend It, came from, you mentioned some of the places that I was interviewed before. When I would give talks or be interviewed by people, they would say to me, okay, Stuffocation, great, James. What you're saying is don't spend on stuff, buy less stuff, spend on experiences instead. That's what we should do. And they'd say to me, okay, so what kind of experiences should I choose? And I didn't know the answer. I had an opinion. I got things that I enjoy doing. And I recognized that, you know, you and I, Ajay, would like different things. My wife and I like different things. Different people like different things. But I wanted to have an answer so I could say, what is the universal grammar, if you like? That, you know, there is a universal person. There are certain things that make us all happy. And I wanted to find out the answer. And hence, when someone said to me, what kind of experiences should I choose? I would have a robust answer based on scientific evidence that meant I could stand up and say, this is what I believe, because this is what the science says. Actually, forget me. This is not what I believe. This is what the science says. So if you want to be happy, if you want to be successful, if you want to be resilient, there is a formula, if you like. There are areas, there are things you should go for. And so I kept on being asked a question I didn't know the answer to, and I wanted to know the answer to it.
Yeah, and I wrote a book about it. That's
Yeah.
great. Okay, so I really like the word Stuffocation, the title of your first book, and it is mainly about collecting stuff and kind of suffocating yourself with this stuff, right? I wanted to ask you, you might have done a lot of research and you have that in your book also. Why are we so materialistic? Why do we collect stuff? And because most of the time we are not even aware that we are collecting stuff, isn't it?
There's a whole bunch of reasons. In the simplest format, stuff is useful. Look at, you and I now, we've both got a pair of headphones on, really good headphones, right? If you go back 40 years, people didn't have headphones this good. We've got, we're talking to each other through a computer. You've got glasses on, you've got you've got a clock on your wall. We've got things are really helpful. We've got great chairs. We've got, cars, airplanes, all these things make life better. So stuff is really good. If you also go back to, if you think in terms of evolutionary psychology, having things around you protect you against issues in the future. Having a home protects you from the elements. Having clothes protects you from getting cold. Having enough food in the house will keep you alive and keep your family alive. Actually, food's a useful way of thinking about this. Okay, so for all of human history, food has been scarce and expensive, whether it's expensive in terms of money, but expensive in terms of time. If you think about, before the modern capitalist economy, if you wanted food, you'd have to grow it and you'd have to look after the animals. There was a lot of effort that went into food. If you ever, I was watching some horses the other day, and these horses, they spend all day eating. This is what, and if you look at, chimpanzees or monkeys or most creatures, what they do is they spend their time getting food. They spend their energy to get food to stay alive. And food is expensive and scarce. And it's the same with stuff, having tools, having a home, etc. Having these things is great for us. And then along comes the Industrial Revolution, incredible. But what the Industrial Revolution does is, instead of it taking a lot of effort to make clothes can be made like that. You look at the spinning jenny, the revolutions that were being created in the north of England, in particular in the 18th century and early 19th century, meant that instead of being able to, one person being able to produce one shirt in a day, I'm making this up slightly, they could produce like 400. I mean, it was incredible kind of, orders of magnitude increase. And actually there's a historian, an Australian historian, who figured this out. And I think it was Eve Fisher, her name, that she looked at the cost of a shirt before the Industrial Revolution would have been something in the order of about $2,000 in modern terms. And if you look at the price of a shirt today, you can get shirts for, obviously you can spend a lot of money, but you can also get a shirt for £5, $10, whatever. It's ubiquitous. And it's the same with food. Before after the Industrial Revolution, the Green Revolutions, food has become ubiquitous and cheap. So therefore what we have is we have obesity. So for the first time in human history, okay, which has come to us, you know, as a result of the Industrial Revolution, the Green Revolutions, we have what's called calorific abundance. We have enough food for people. And as a result, okay, we've got obesity. And stuffocation is the material equivalent of the obesity epidemic. So what's happening is that in the food context is we're using mental tools that were honed over millennia, you know, since Homo sapiens appeared, what, 300,000 odd years ago. So every generation, you know, generation's about 25 years, I think is the official thing. So a grandmother and a mother and a father and a grandfather would always say to the kids, eat food, seafood, eat food, eat as much as you can, because there's going to be a time of when it's difficult. So you and I, Ajay, are the produce of greedy ancestors who were, you know, clever ancestors. Eat seafood, eat food. And it was the same with stuff. But to come back to this, so because of that, we have these, you know, I guess receptors, whatever, you know, we are adapted to eat probably more than we need to. And that, the thing is, seafood, eat food made loads of sense when food was not abundant, when it was expensive and scarce. That made all sorts of sense. And now that we have calorific abundance and there's lots of food, all of a sudden, wow, we get obesity. First time ever is a major problem in society. And it's the same with stuff. Stuff used to be expensive and scarce, and now it's cheap and plentiful, and therefore we can't help ourselves.
But if you look at the current scenario, not just the COVID, but overall in the, let's say in the last 10, 20 years, because it's so easily available and abundant, people go and buy it, and that gives them some sort of happiness, right? It's a instant gratification, or it keeps them high. And if we're all of a sudden start to tell them that, oh, that's not the right way, you should be more minimalistic, then are we not at the risk of throwing them into some sort of dull lifestyle, or, you know, people might even go into dull mood. So mental health issues might come, I don't know.
If you think that you're going to get happiness by buying more stuff, that just isn't the case. The whole concept of retail therapy is kind of nonsense. Just to be really clear, of course, you know, the idea of finding food makes you happy. The idea of, you know, killing an animal, you know, going back to evolutionary psychology, where we come from, that is going to be food for you, food for the family. So achieving something, of course, is part of who we are. And we are designed is the wrong term, but we are adapted to get pleasure from these things. So when you buy something new, of course, you get a hit. But it's a bit like eating sugary sweet, sugary foods. They will give you a hit, but then you drop again, you need something else. And the problem with stuff is that because of something called hedonic adaptation, well, that's, you know, that describes, we just get used to stuff too quickly. You think you get a new thing, you're like, wow, this is new, you play with it, and then after a while it just becomes part of the furniture. And in terms of people having a dull life, collecting stuff, more and more and more things will give you a very dull life. But if you can switch your allegiance from things to experiences, that's when you're starting to live. That's when you're starting to increase your well-being. You know, this new book, Time and How to Spend It, is specifically about, obviously, how to spend your time, what you should choose. And my you know, one of the major things I think I discovered in that is that what the psychologists have discovered is that just as there are junk foods, and there are heavily processed, and there are foods that are just really bad for your health, foods that will be bad for your skin, bad for your hair, bad for your, you know, the clarity of your eyes, your ability to see, your muscles, your ability to concentrate. So there are superfoods. Okay. And sorry, just as there are these things in foods, so they are in ways of spending your money and spending your time. And if you shift your focus to experiences rather than things, you are, by a whole bunch of reasons, more likely to be happy. I mean, there are, you know, if you look at materialism, there's a great guy who wrote a book called High Price of Materialism, a guy called Tim Kasser at Knox University in the States. It's a brilliant book. It goes through all the evidence over decades that shows that being materialistic is really bad for health. And if you look at the stuff in Stuffocation, and you look at the chapters that look at this in particular, it talks through the discoveries by scientists, people like Tom Gilovich at Cornell University, Daniel Kahneman, Princeton, and others, that show that there's a bunch of reasons why experiences are better for you. So if you want to have an exciting life, don't go buy more stuff, because I mean, even one thing, really simple thing, okay, if you tell a story to someone about your stuff, they will be bored. If you tell someone a story about something you did, you've got a much higher chance that they will want to listen to you. That means you're going to have more friends.
And
that's a good thing.
yeah, and you introduced the new term called XQ, right? After the emotional intelligence and IQ, you also need to have XQ in order to be having a happy life. Tell us more about that.
Thanks for asking about that, because it's a so IQ was originally was kind of defined in the early 1910s, 20s, 30s, but early 20th century by a variety of different psychologists, different countries. Started off in Germany, I think. But IQ is about general intelligence, and the idea really that the definition is about thinking in a way that will lead to success. And in the late 80s, psychologists were playing around different areas of other things apart from IQ that would lead to success. And the result was this idea of EQ. In particular, a paper by a couple of psychologists in New York, and it was popularized by a guy called Daniel Goleman in his book Emotional Intelligence in the early 1990s, that showed very clearly that if you want to be successful, IQ is super important. You know, if you're going to hire somebody, cognitive ability is like the first thing you should look for. But also it turns out that EQ, emotional intelligence, the ability to recognize your emotions, recognize the emotions in others, and manage your emotions and choose certain courses of action in order to be successful, is also really relevant to be successful. And in the work that I've been looking at, it seems clear to me from reading, I've talked to psychologists and I've read their papers at all sorts of universities, from Tokyo to UCLA to, the LSE and MIT, etc. And it's very clear that knowing that experiences are better than material goods is more likely to lead to happiness. And then the question becomes, what kind of experiences should I choose in order to be happy? And it turns out, here's the other thing, is that happiness leads to success. People think that success leads to happiness. Obviously success and happiness are closely connected. But it turns out, and this is from people like Laura King, Sean Aker at Harvard, and a bunch of other people have discovered it's really clear. If you want to be successful, you should firstly aim for happiness, not success. If you lots of us think wrongly that if we get the girl, the guy, the car, the job, the this, we'll achieve this thing, right? That if we get that, we'll be happy. And that just doesn't work. It's the other way around. If you get the happiness, the other stuff comes. And this is, again, as with almost everything I say, this is not my thoughts on it. My job, what I think of myself as doing, is taking the science, distilling it, thinking about it, and trying to put it into something that's practical for, I'll be honest, first of all, me and my family, right? I want to use this. I do use this stuff. And then sharing that stuff. So if you want to be successful, you need to really focus on being happy first. If you want to be happy, then you should think about the kind of experiences you should have in life. And so XQ is experience intelligence, because if you know the kind of experiences you should have that are more likely to lead to happiness, you are setting yourself up to lead to success. And so I think of XQ in two ways. And it's a bit like IQ. There's no point in knowing stuff and not doing something about it. There's nothing more frustrating than knowing stuff and not using it. So some of the I've got this XQ test that I get people to take, and I'm doing some work with a company in California at the moment with a team of architects based in Santa Barbara and Santa Monica, and I got them to take it, and it always works the same. People, what are they probably know 60, 65, 70% of the kind of things they should do to be happy. But they don't always do the things. Even when they know there's a better choice, they sometimes they usually make the wrong decision. Because our world, in the same way that with food, our world is designed to make us eat fast food and simple foods, partly because we want to buy ready meals, and we haven't got time to eat, and the adverts around this stuff as well. It's very powerful marketing machines. And it's the same with our time. There are lots of things designed around modern life that make us, you know, just as we choose junk foods and processed foods, we choose junk food ways of spending our time. And XQ is about being able to know the difference between the junk ways of spending our time and superfood ways of spending our time, and choose the right thing as well. And if you do that, you increase your odds, you increase your chances of happiness and resilience and success, and, you know, the good stuff that we want in life.
Mm. And your book, the second book, which is about time and how to spend it, is actually more focused on the experience side of the time rather than how to save time, really. I wanted to get into that a little bit more in detail. So you have a 7-step, 7 elements of how to best spend your time. Could you tell us more about those 7 things?
Yeah. First up, is worth saying that one of the things I think about knowing how to be happy and successful is there is so much information out there. How do you make sense of it? And the problem with loads of different information and new bits of stories coming in and new ideas is that it's hard to remember the right thing to do. And so I wanted to turn it into a checklist that was easy to remember and therefore easy to use. So there you are on a, you know, a Monday morning or a Sunday afternoon, or you're planning your vacation, or you're, you know, you're doing something at the weekend. I wanted it to be easy to be memorable. And so the 7 rules are, they spell stories, STORIES, which makes it sound very convenient they spell that, but I spent about 3 months trying to come up with that. It was embarrassing, frankly. I'd be like tearing my hair out. That's why I'm bald, or balding. Like surely I can turn all this information. I work in the kitchen space downstairs, and we've got a whiteboard, and I had pieces of paper all over the wall. I was trying to connect the dots between, I don't know if you've ever gone through this process, Ajay, but it can be very frustrating trying to make sense of things and to put it into something that's useful. Anyway, it came out as stories because I wanted it to be memorable. And the stories stand for story is the first one, transformation, outside and offline, relationships, intensity, extraordinary, and status and significance. Mm-hmm. And each of those is either 1 or 2 words, but each of them has frameworks beneath it. But it's also, it's all backed by science. So people have done the research that say that if you aim for this, you can think of them as opportunity areas. If you aim for transformation, if you aim to be outside and offline, if you aim for something extraordinary, if you aim for status and significance, you will increase your chances of being happy. Some of them, of course, are much simpler to understand than others. Outside and offline, really easy to understand. Extraordinary, it takes some more. Relationships, simple. And some are more subtle, but it's transformative. It really is transformative stuff.
How come status gives you more happiness?
How come? So there's different theories on this. It's kind of interesting. There's a guy, what's his name? He's at Cambridge, Indian name, who talks about control, capabilities, and social participation, those elements of status that are so important. And that's terrible that I can't remember his name. Can I just get the book and have a look? Because I feel wrong doing that. Is that okay?
That's fine.
And that's going to make this go slightly lower. Hold on. Status. But this, I mean, the starting point is there's a book called Status Syndrome by a guy called Michael Marmot, who's an Australian guy, but he's I think he's a Sir over here. Okay. It's Amartya Sen at the University of Cambridge. It's kind of pretty famous. I should have got that. And the book Status Syndrome, it shows, I think it's like a number of decades of work, like 3 decades of work, that shows that people who have more status live longer, healthier, happier lives. So it's really, you know, who would admit, oh yeah, what I want is status in life, right? We don't say that we would want that thing, but there again, we would definitely go to the gym more often and eat more green vegetables. So I want people to be, there was real tension in calling that chapter Status and Significance, because lots of people, and I ran workshops before I put the book together, they just don't like to say, I want to have status. You know, the significance, they're fine with. Yeah, okay, fine, that makes sense. But status is really core, and I want to kind of like maybe push people a little bit there. But anyway, so Amartya Sen's idea of control, capabilities, and social participation. So if you have more status, you are more likely to be in control of your situation. Let me give you an example at the moment with coronavirus. So of course, it's very stressful for people losing their jobs. I mean, God, it's going to be a really tough time over the next 6 to 12 months or so, I think, oh, this autumn's going to be pretty tough. And, you know, people losing their jobs already, coming out of furlough and then not going back to a job. And I'm hearing similar things from entrepreneurs who are like, oh, it's, you know, but an entrepreneur is much more in control of their situation. One of the really interesting results from Michael Marmot's work is that, you know, there's this popular conception that the people on the top, you know, with the higher status and the higher salaries, etc., have more stress than the others. That just isn't true. That just is not true at all. So being, you know, an entrepreneur has, the, you know, by definition, right, they are not in control of lots of things, but they are more in control. They have been through that process. When you are an employee and you've lost your job, well, what you need to do is find another job. But that decision is in somebody else's hands. But, you know, whether there is a job, it's in the economy's hands, it's in, you know, you apply for jobs, there's other people going for them. With an entrepreneur, you are, you know, you're riding your own wave, you're creating your own opportunities. That's kind of what you do. And social participation, I think, is to do with mattering to other people, because what's interesting about this story stuff is they are all distinct, but they also mutually reinforce each other. So the R of stories is relationships. And there's a lot of data that backs this up, but the one that I'll mention here is from the Harvard study that's been running since 1939. So this is an 80-year study looking at people, and what they found very clearly is the people who live the longest, happiest, healthy lives. It's not really so important if and how much they smoke, how much they exercise, how much they drink. The key thing is their connection to other people. Their friends, their family. And if you think about this idea of status, of control and capabilities, being able to do, you know, giving you opportunity to do stuff, but also social participation, that means that you matter to other people if you're involved. And I think there's that, yeah, you know, being connected, you know, if you have more status, you're more connected. One of the things that Michael Marmot found very clearly was how status is connected to TV watching. And people with lower status watch more TV. Now, whether that's because they can't afford to go out so much, or whether it's because, I mean, you know, these are correlations, not causations, just to be really clear. Yeah. You know, it just turns out that people with higher status watch less TV. But it's a bit like exercise. We go to the outside and offline. One of the reasons why being outside and offline is great, for being outside in particular, is we tend to exercise when we're out. Also, when you think about it, when you're out, I mean, of course, apart from people walking along watching their telephones the whole time, we tend to also connect. We're likely to connect with other people when we go outside. But exercise, it turns out that, and this is from an 11-year study, I think it was at Harvard again, amazingly. After an 11-year study, they couldn't figure out how the relationship worked between happiness, well-being they call it, but happiness, right? And exercise. They didn't know if exercise caused people to be happier or happier people exercised more. No, or being happy caused people to exercise more. They didn't know but what they decided was it was a bi-directional feedback loop. But basically, my take on these kind of things is, okay, fine, hold on. There's a correlation here. People who are happier exercise more. Right, what am I going to do today? Oh, I'm going to exercise more. Here's the thing I can do. I can't just go, I'm going to be happier. That's you can't just, you can't just buy happiness on Amazon. You can't just, you can't buy it in an app. You can do exercise. And it's the same with this status and significance. And coming back to this idea of TV watching, we know that there's this connection, this relationship between TV watching and status and happiness. And so I'm like, should I watch TV? Well, I watch TV, but I watch it a lot less now because I know how those things work. And if you watch less TV, you might have more time to go and check on your neighbor. Anyway, this comes, I'm just thinking that status and significance is about doing stuff for other people. That's social participation. I'm very lucky. I live on a street where people really came together around coronavirus. It's been wonderful for the atmosphere on our street. Everyone now not everyone, but most people have connected. And so I think this status connects you to other people because you're out there doing something.
Yeah, I think I got that.
Sorry, you asked me one question and I just went off.
I just got confused because status is sometimes, people who have quite a lot of fame they have achieved, but they're still not really happy. So I just got confused with that, and that's why I asked this question.
That's a very good point. And actually, I've talked to Tim Cassett about this, and there is definitely tension around this. Look, the thing about humans, of course, is we're very complex creatures. You know, we live in huge, complex societies with millions of people, and you know, so there's going to be tensions, and people who are materialism is associated with obviously getting things, but also extrinsic motivation, being famous, being the big person. And that's why it's status and significance. Because you can have status and be the big I am with a Ferrari and a Range Rover and a big house and a big these things, and be really lonely.
Yeah.
It's not always the case. I mean, you know, this is same for all humans, right? You don't need a lot of money to be very happy. But you know, I'm not. I mean, the book is not anti-money. It's not. It's not. I recognise that there is. This is one of the things when you move away from a materialistic to an experientialist point of view. Okay, I think this is really essential. And if I, you know, if I could change the world and make the world more experientialist and materialistic, is the world looks very different. So the banker who has a yacht and a home, you know, another home in the countryside and a big car and a big house and all these things, from a materialistic perspective, is richer clearly than lots of other people. But from an experiential perspective, who sees their friends more? Who sees their family more? Who's connected with their friends? Who's got time to play tennis with their friends? Who's got, I say that I lost at tennis yesterday. I'm rubbish at tennis. But you know, who's our experience of life, the experience of the pauper and the experience of the prince are just different experiences. One is fancier than the other, but one is not necessarily better than the other. It's just different.
Yeah. So we've kind of, you're addressing the question of how to spend time when you have it. But the bigger problem is that most people don't have time, right? And my question is then,
who are these people? Are
well,
they
everybody,
alive? These are people who are dead. The only people who don't have time are dead, surely. The rest of us have got 24 hours in a day.
Exactly. But you talk to them and they're like, yeah, super busy. You ask them how busy are you? Oh, I have no time, no time to breathe. That's what they say. So I want to know how do you, because everybody has 24 hours, right? The most productive people, richest people, and those who are not achieving anything, everybody has the same number of time, number of hours. How does your model help people identify where is the free time slot that I can use to spend in experiences or anything that you suggest? How to find that time in the first place?
Great question. I've been doing workshops with people, and the number, it's really interesting. Coronavirus has changed it. Lots of people have got more time, lots of people have got less time.
Yeah.
And I know those people. I had a drink with a woman that I know through work recently, and she is just, I mean, she's at breaking point, and she cried. We've been sat down for about 7 or 8 minutes, and she just suddenly started crying with all the things that she's doing to try and keep her business afloat and keep people employed. And it's, you know, really touched me. It's tough. The thing is, life's short. Our time here is coming to a close. And so the only thing that we have is some time. And so how you spend your time, knowing how to spend your time, is the most important thing you do. And if you think you have no time, probably the starting point is think, well, obviously I do. What am I spending my time on? Is it the stuff that matters to me? Is it the stuff that helps me in order to be happy? And the book begins actually with the 7 reasons that sociologists, economists, and psychologists have identified why we struggle with time today. And probably the biggest problem is, hold on, these things. We're all addicted to them. You know, it's insane. The average person, just to be really clear, nobody is average. Everyone always thinks, you know, we're all special, right? We're all better than the average driver. But the average person has more time today than we've had for decades.
I agree.
It's pretty kind of, well, and just saying, this comes from time use studies. This is not my view on it. This is what's been discovered. And I mean, there are some changes. So women are doing slightly less housework. Men are doing slightly more. You know, women still carry the burden. Of course, nobody's average. You know, the entrepreneur will say, I do this. And we, you know, people, we got people who live over the road who don't have children. And that looks like they've got a lot of time on their hands, those people, you're not so busy. But if you look at stuff, the average person checks their phone about 150 times a day. I mean, extreme users are like 300, 350 times a day. And we're on our devices. The average is about 3 to 3.5 hours. It's very hard to get specific statistics around this because different, research suggests different things. But if you start to think that, we have 24 hours in a day, let's say you classic work, rest and play, you do 8 hours of work. That means you've got 8 hours of play, or, and obviously you need to eat and you need to, manage your home and pay your bills or whatever. You need to do some things in that time, manage your admin, and you've got 8 hours to sleep. Well, let's get real here. If you're doing an 8-hour day at work, you've got 8 hours before you need to go to sleep. So what are you doing with that time? You do have that time. And maybe if you spend less than 3.5 hours or 5 hours or whatever, let's say you're on your device an amount of time, plus you're watching TV. That's why people don't have time. So, and there's another thing. I mean, there's multitasking. So many of us do multitasking because we think, oh, that'll be clever. While I'm sat on the train, I'll do some work. While I'm sat on the toilet, I'll check my email or the football score or Facebook. While I'm taking my kids to the park, I might just check in on my emails. Or while I'm sitting there waiting for my friend in the bar, I'll check my email or Twitter or something. And multitasking, we think we're being clever, but actually the term that sociologists use is contaminated time. It actually makes you feel more time pressed. And when we're time pressed, this is other research, we make worse decisions. Having the space to think and, get away from the fight or flight kind of, extreme adrenaline kind of feeling is really good for thinking. And let me think of the other things. I mean, there's so many things that we could do today. One of the magical things about holiday, when you go to a beach holiday, is there's nothing to do. So you feel like you have loads of time because there's nothing to do there. Whereas especially if you live in a city, you and I both live in London, there's always a pop-up. Actually, no, because of coronavirus, lots of things aren't happening. But generally what's going on is there's all these possibilities of things we could do. And there's, demands on our time. And one of the, I think the problem is worth pointing out here is that there's a fetishization of work. When people talk about time management, they think about work. And when we think about educating ourselves, people want to get a degree in marketing or a business thing, and they want to be better at work. We don't think about how we can be better at managing our free time, because nobody's taught us this stuff, which is why there's a place in the world for my book, Time and How to Spend It. And the same with stuff. You talked to me before and you said, what made you want to do this? I thought, well, people don't know this stuff. If I was just saying something that someone else had already said, I wouldn't want to say it, I don't think.
But, when let's take children, right? So children, they live in experiences. Yeah. So they live the kind of stuff that you're telling. So they, like everything that they see, they want to do it, right? They want to experiment it and see how it is, right? And they learn from that, because they're inherently not really getting stuff to collect. They just want things to experiment with them, right? So a child wants 10 different type of balls, for example, just to experience with them, right? Not to collect them. But oftentimes it happens that we start collecting. I don't know when does this transition happen, and in that duration, if we tell them these kind of theories, right, so focus on experiments, not on the collection of stuff, I think that'll be really cool. And we somehow are not able to do that, and that's the reason that people are kind of losing touch of the experiences and getting more into the materialism, isn't it?
We live in a consumer society, and we're surrounded by messages that say buy this, buy that, and you'll be happy. And the first thing that parents need to do is be experientialists themselves, so that kids will learn that. I'm not a minimalist. I don't have a lot of stuff, but we have things. My kids they love Lego, and they get a lot of joy from Lego. But we bought an inflatable canoe during lockdown. And it's been amazing because we have amazing experiences. We aim for experiences, and encourage them to think about that way. So, and think twice before buying more stuff.
If you want to teach this behavior to children, the best way is to teach it to the parents, isn't it? So that they live these values so that the children learn it from them.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking out loud of what is the best way to teach it to children.
I like what you're saying. I don't know, truth be told. I'm not, I'm teaching my own children by, and I think I always said this in Stuffocation, is if you want people to get this, forget the stuff. Don't worry about the stuff. Focus on the experiences. If you create stories and memories with your kids and you're like, wow, we did this thing, that's what they'll value. That's what you'll value. The key to being less materialistic, well, the first thing is to realize that it's not our fault, because it's just inherent to want some stuff to be safe. It's also important to realize it's not our fault because we live in a consumer society that is built, the success of our society, the reason that you and I have comfortable homes and, great showers is the incredible success of capitalism. And capitalism in our societies is based on consumers. The consumer economy is, in the UK, I think it's about 65-70%. In the US, it's slightly larger. But that's why in the time of coming out of coronavirus, the first thing the government says is everybody go shopping. We need people to spend money in order to have great standards of living. It's just very simple. So therefore, we've been socialized into thinking and acting that way. The key, and this is borrowing from, psychologists like the guy that wrote Persuasion, Bob Cialdini, but among others, right? If you want to change the direction of a horse, the best way to do that is to get on the horse and ride it in the direction it's going. And it's the same with people. If you get people and they're going like this and you try and make them go here, they're going to resist. It's just not going to make sense. So the best thing to do is carry on the direction they're going and just swerve it. So my take is that carry on being a consumer, carry on doing what you do. But when you find yourself next about to buy another pair of shoes or more stuff you don't need, take that money, mental accounting to an extent, and think, right, I've got to spend it on an experience, and then go have an experience. And the more that you focus on doing things, going to, I don't know, sport, things that you haven't done before, experiences like secret cinema, it can be digital experiences, but you should try and get out more too, and away from the machines, then you will show your kids that's how to live, because that's how kids learn, right? It's mimicry.
And that's how you kind of give them those values. That's great. Yeah. Okay, James, one question I ask most of my guests, and which is what do you think are the 2 to 3 core essential skills that children should have and they are not taught in schools?
Well, I think it's the 3 things that my book talks about in terms of success, happiness, and resilience, and these all being connected. And if you learn how to use your time, it will give you that opportunity. I think resilience is taught in schools. I think it has, sport, for example. Losing's great. It's so good to lose a game and enjoy the game. And it's so good to get back up and try again. So I think, there's a big fuss. You've probably seen this stuff around resilience, right? So being taught resilience is absolutely essential because things go wrong for everybody at some point. And the data shows it's not necessarily academic achievement. It's resilience that is the biggest, I think, the greatest predictor of success in life for kids. And well-being, they're shifting towards the well-being in school stuff. Nir Eyal, I don't know if you've come across Nir Eyal, the American writer, talks about indistractable, which is really about getting away from the device. You talk about kids being in the experiences. That's the I of the stories checklist, intensity. And there's a checklist of what you can do to design how to be right there, right now, doing something. What I try and do with my kids is teach them, resilience. And I teach, my daughter, if she sees me looking at my phone, she's just like, Daddy, outside and offline. It's great because it stops me checking the football score again. So yeah, resilience, when we go, I take them climbing and I try and push them at the right, to the right level. Or we go, we went out on this boat, and my daughter got wet and she was all upset and crying. Come on, you just got wet, you're fine. Within a minute, she turned it round. And she actually, I think within about 5 minutes, she jumped in the water. It's wonderful to see resilience. Yeah. But you see, if you spend your time in the right kind of way, doing the right kind of things, these things will come.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why experiences are so great is that if you look at the things you should do to build resilience, they're almost, they almost fit hand in glove with the reasons why experiences are better than material goods at making us happy. So, it kind of comes, if you want resilience, focus on experiences. If you want to be successful, you need to be happy. In order to be happy, you need to focus on experiences. So therefore, this 7-point checklist, this stories checklist is what a kid should learn. And they're not teaching it in schools. And I'm trying to think about the elements that I was taught, it's about learning, about growth, going outside, having friends. It's being a full human, right? It's being fully alive. It's that fullest development idea. Because this isn't, the happiness is a bit of a lazy term, because there's nothing wrong with sadness. You should be sad. Things should go wrong. But the key is that kind of, here we are, these monkeys who've learned to write, and we may as well have a fun time along the journey. And in order to do that, to get the most out of the short time, there's this lovely line, from a guy called Catullus, a Roman poet from the 1st century AD. He talks about brevis lux, the brief life we have. And he talks about, then he says, nox est perpetua dormienda. And at the end of the brief light that we have, there's this never ending night that we're asleep for forever. Yeah. And until that light comes, Dylan Thomas, don't rage against the dying of the light, but do something until it all closes up around you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What are your future plans now? You've given 2 bestsellers. Are we waiting for the 3rd one, or what's going on?
I've just come from a meeting with my agent, and yes, I'm working on a couple, but I'm also doing a whole bunch of things. I'm making a startup. The startup I failed at, having another go. I think I've been to business school because I failed, but I wanted to know why I'd failed, and I wanted to be better at it. It's been a real journey, fascinating, and I got this brilliant designer. So I'm having another go at this startup, and it's about experiences. And in fact, it's about experience gifting. I won't go into it in too much detail because that'll be, no, it's amazing. I'm really excited. It's called Dancing Peacock. It's really fun. And we help people give really amazing experience gifts, and they club together and they buy really amazing things for people. And I'm doing that. I'm launching something called the WXO, a World Experience Organization, which is like the WTO or the WEF, or B Corps or the Soil Association for the experience economy. So it's a lot of work bringing together the incredible number of geniuses, from user experience to immersive theatre. To Joe Pine is on board, who wrote the book The Experience Economy. I've got Dutch people, Italian people, Americans, but it needs to be a global thing, and it needs to be about the community. And it's that's a lot of work. And I teach people how to spend their time, both in terms of corporate ways. I'm working with these brilliant Californians at the moment, an architecture firm. I'm working with the National Portraits Gallery in London.
Finally, James, how can people reach you?
Do you know, I'm first name dot last name at gmail.com if they really want to connect with me. But I've got websites, stuffocation.org, timeandhowtospendit.com. But maybe via you.
Definitely.
Ajay, what do you think?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much, James. It was really interesting conversation with you, and I really learned a lot about time, mostly in how to spend rather than not how to save it. Find it and do what you want to do with that. So that was a really fascinating conversation. Thanks a lot for that. So guys, if you're looking for how to spend your time, if you're struggling to figure that out, then go and reach out to James's website or his book or some of the talks that he has given, which are available on YouTube. That is quite interesting, and I think you will get a lot of value from it. I will see you again next time. Till then, goodbye.